Jesus taught with authority. He taught about the heart. His words, his examples, using a coin, talking about water. He taught simple yet profound lessons that convict and apply even today. One of the things that really gets me excited when we talk about the life of Jesus is the teaching that he did. People have described him as a master communicator, and one of the things that really stands out is his ability to say such powerful things in such short spans of time with such simple illustrations.
Jesus' teaching was so simple. However, there's some hidden nuances in a lot of things he taught that we don't fully appreciate because we're separated by time. When he's telling the story of the Good Samaritan, he doesn't describe the road. It's because the people of that time understood how dangerous that road was. And when he's talking about paying taxes to Caesar, he talks about the denarius. To us, that's just a coin. But to the people of that time, they understood everything that was involved with that coin.
So you're saying that there's a cultural and historical gap between the people who originally heard Jesus' teaching and ourselves. And if we come to be more familiar with their history and with their culture, that we'll have a better understanding of what Jesus was communicating to them.
We are at the Church of the Beatitudes, which is on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. It's built on top of a site that was established in the 4th century. And I wanted to bring you up here because this is the possible location of one of the most famous sermons that Jesus ever spoke. In Matthew 5, verses 1, it says, "Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him." And of course, we know this as the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, whether it happened exactly here or somewhere near here, the geography of the area fits the description in the Bible very closely.
It has fantastic gardens. As soon as you walk up, you're just greeted by these flowering bushes and trees and shade, and the rest of the hillside doesn't have that. So to walk up to such an incredibly beautiful place is special.
This area would have been very important for Jesus. Not only did he live here, but there's a strategic importance as well. The Via Maris ran from Egypt all the way up to Mesopotamia. And so anybody traveling through this area would have listened to the teaching of Jesus or heard some of the stories about some of the things he did and would have been able to carry the news of that throughout the world.
Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Matthew takes up 3 chapters to cover that, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Luke also takes up quite a bit at the beginning of his gospel. And there are a lot of people that have talked about what that sermon meant. There's some people that view Jesus just as a political revolutionary. There's some people that see him as just a good moral teacher like Aesop and his fables. But really, Jesus doesn't leave any room for those kinds of ideas. He's not speaking as just another teacher. He's not speaking as a rabbi. He's speaking with authority. In chapter 5, you have him repeatedly say, "You've heard it said, but I say to you." And then when you get to chapter 6, he's helping them understand that there's a difference between how people are practicing their religion to be seen by others and how you really need to get to the heart of things. Over in chapter 7, he puts himself in a position of being able to judge at the end of time. He's set himself up as much more than just a man. To read through his sermon, you can't just go through and say, well, this is a list of good things to do, or these are good suggestions. Jesus is speaking from a position of authority, which makes him to be divine. All the way through the Sermon on the Mount, he's trying to explain what it looks like when people belong to his kingdom, this spiritual kingdom, starting with the Beatitudes, what it means to pray, making sure you do things with your focus on heaven and not trying to please men, the golden rule, which almost everyone is familiar with, and then he closes it with a 3-part invitation, and that last part is where he's challenging people to think about what they're building their lives on. Are they going to build their lives on anything other than God, which is like building your house on sand? Or are you going to build your life and your house on the authority of Jesus and his teaching as the Son of God? And if you do that, you're like someone who builds your house on a rock. that's going to be able to weather whatever kind of storm life may throw at you.
I would have loved to have been in the audience. When he got through, they were amazed at his authority.
To think about being at the top of the mountain from Jesus' perspective and looking down and seeing all of these people that were so spiritually hungry finally being fed is just overwhelming. And the fact that we're able to sit at his feet today and experience the exact same thing, no matter where we may be sitting or no matter where we may live, we can experience the exact same teaching.
At the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, it says that he left the mount and he went down to Capernaum. And if you look over my shoulder, you can actually see Capernaum just down the hill from where we are. It's a wonderful illustration of what we read in the Bible.
We know Jesus did a lot of teaching on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. There's that triangle up here on the north between three cities where he did 80% of his ministry. Now, where would we go from here to see some of those places?
Well, we want to go down to the Cove of the Sower. This is where he pushed off into the water just a little ways so he could speak to the people on the hillside.
Well, I think this is right. You can correct me. You have never led a tour group down to the Cove of the Sower.
No.
And why is that?
It's almost impossible to get to.
Okay, so it was amazing to go to. It was a lot of work. It was worth the work. But the average person coming to Israel is not going to make that stop.
No, from the place that we found to park that we could access it, it was probably 45 minutes hike.
Over rocks.
It was very difficult to get there. Jeremy, we've come to the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and as you can tell, there's a natural cove here in the shoreline just behind us. In the mid-1980s, there was a drought in this area, and the water level dropped and exposed a number of harbors around the Sea of Galilee.
We know from Luke chapter 5 that one of the times Jesus was coming along this side of the sea, there were a lot of people crowding around him trying to hear him. And when he got to some spot around here, he got into a boat with Peter and pushed back from the shore and spoke up to the people that were still on the land. Now, standing here in this cove, you can turn around and see it forms kind of a natural amphitheater. And it's really easy to imagine Jesus. This is his stage as he turns and faces the people and speaks up to them.
Many people have questioned whether or not Jesus could actually be heard by a large group of people if he's a few feet off the shoreline. Let's do an experiment. Let me go up the hill a little ways, and when I get up there, I want you to read the parable of the sower in a natural but loud speaking voice, and let me see if I can hear it.
Sounds good.
Okay, Jeremy, I'm in position. Go ahead and read that passage and let me see if I can hear you.
All right, I'm going to read from Matthew 13.
That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down.
The instant he started talking, I thought for a second he was still using the intercom. I could hear him perfectly. No doubt if I was twice as far away, I could have heard him easily.
And the whole crowd stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parables, saying,
A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil, and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. The parable of the sower really marked the beginning of Jesus using parables in his ministry. That one really paved the way. And you finally get to the end of the parable and Jesus has this invitation, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Explaining even to his disciples afterwards, who didn't get the parable, that we need to make sure that we're paying attention and allowing Jesus to teach us what he wants to teach us, and that we're going to hear and allow his word to go deep into our lives.